It is always special when you can land a legacy in recruiting. And this one is going to help Miami's defensive backfield for years to come. From the 704 back to the 305. Camdin Portis, welcome to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. And yeah, it's a happy Monday when you're 8-0, when you just beat your rivals, and when you've got a new commit in recruiting. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, writer at Canes County on Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On this loaded episode of Locked On Canes, we are going to start looking ahead to Saturday's opponent, 12 noon, high noon at Hard Rock Stadium. Manny Diaz makes his return with the Duke Blue Devils. We'll see if Miami can continue to 9-0 on the season with Duke coming to town. We'll talk about what we learned, good and bad, about your Hurricanes from this victory over Florida State this past weekend. 36-14, 22-point win for Miami. But we got to talk about the newest Miami Hurricane. We're going to talk about all these things with the man, the myth, the legend, Larry Blustein, Prep Red Zone, Florida, 560 WQAM. So, Blue, as mentioned, it's always nice to keep the legacies home. In the case of Camdin Portis, son of Clinton Portis, I know he wants to make his own legacy at the University of Miami.
Yeah, no doubt. Thanks for having us, Alex. You get in a situation. I remember when his dad was coming out of Gainesville High School, and, here's somebody that a lot of people hadn't heard of because he was split his time between defensive back and running back. And obviously got here at the University of Miami. We know the story, probably one of the top running backs ever to our University of Miami uniform. But his son is a little bit different, a 5'11", 170-pound kid, is a defensive back, comes from Myers Park High School in Charlotte, North Carolina, obviously where his dad played, in the area, and I believe settled in that area for a while. I mean, this is a kid that's a four-star. You know how I feel about stars. You got to kind of earn them when you get there, but somebody who, as you said, definitely has an opportunity to help Miami's secondary, which is probably of all things during an 8-0 season, the weakest part of the team. But you know what, to have somebody who is a legacy, who is so much looking forward to joining a program that is on the rise, top 8, top 10 in recruiting for the 25 class. He's part of the 26 class. So obviously this helps to elevate that class as well. So, and then, in this day and age, it's always a mix of what you can get out of the portal and what you do recruiting wise. And we just saw a team the other day in Florida State that hit on the portal for a couple of years. Then all of a sudden they leave and they didn't do as well. And that's why, they're in the situation that they're in. But it's really tough these days. And you can see everybody. Look, if I told you back in August that Indiana would be undefeated as well, that probably wouldn't have been on your bingo card. So that's, you take a look at some of the things in college football today, especially with the portal. And what Miami's done is they've kind of changed things. There's a lot of emphasis in recruiting, but while they hit the portal, their emphasis is really, really on recruiting. And as you could see with all the freshmen that they played this year, a lot of the redshirt freshmen from last year, they're definitely setting the tone. And that's why adding somebody like a Camdin Portis is huge from that standpoint, because they may go out and get a 21-year-old cornerback, but at least they'll have some 17, 18-year-old kid that's learning, at the same time.
Yeah, no doubt. And Camdin Portis, by the way, 24/7 Sports has him ranked as the 18th cornerback in the class of 2026, 12th player from the state of North Carolina. He's in the national top 200 at 195 for the class of 2026. And obviously Miami holds a special place in its heart, given, what his father Clinton did at Miami, who again was one of the best running backs this program has ever had. In terms of Camdin Portis, Blue, once he does arrive at Miami 2026, hopefully spends 3 to 4 really, really good years at the U. What's the ceiling for him, you think, in a Lance Guidry defense?
Yeah, well, it's very athletic, and that's the one thing. You take a look at, as you mentioned, one of the top-rated cornerbacks in the country. But, having an opportunity to be so athletic and somebody who has been around the game all their lives. You could be around the game and play it as much as you'd like to, but when you have somebody, that you grew up around who arguably was one of the top football players, whether it be at the high school, collegiate, and even into the NFL, it makes a difference. And I think, not only is he a legacy, and that, that's always important, but that's not always, a for sure thing that the person is going to be the same. But the very fact that we see what he does at the high school level, obviously he'll be in all-star games when he's, when the class is for next year. Although I understand that, and I believe both all-star games this year, they're adding juniors. So you never know if he gets a invite to either the Army All-American game or even the Under Armour game. So, he adds a lot to it. Very fact that, he's a producer, and he's just, he's played at a high level, in the North Carolina area of football. And that's why. And believe me, they don't just regard you as a tremendous player just because you're related to somebody.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, Blue, you mentioned earlier that despite, Miami's 8-0 start, that the current group of defensive backs has probably been the weakness on this team. They had a bounce back performance against Florida State. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's been a problematic area this year. So you look at what Mario Cristobal is going to be bringing in and recruiting. Now, Camdin Portis is a couple years down the road, but you look at what Miami already has with a couple of younger guys, OJ Frederic, who's played a ton, Damari Brown, a second-year guy who, was looking good in that Florida game before he got injured. Unfortunately, we may not see him again until like the very, very end of the year. And then you look at some of the guys Miami has locked in the class of 2025, like Hilton Drake Stubbs, Jabari Antoine, Bryce Fitzgerald, Chris Ewald, to name a few. Do you think that Mario Cristobal, Chevis Jackson, Lance Guidry are recruiting that group the right way? And within the next year or two, can we turn defensive back from a liability into a strength?
Well, you bring up a good point, too, because you look at the guys that they have and they're all young, on the team now, from a Hill to the Jedias Richards or Zaquan Patterson, or Dylan
Zaquan,
Day.
another one. I should have mentioned him. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying that you have guys like that. The only one I believe is, I think Mish Powell would be a senior, but you still have guys like that. Markeith Williams, who's, still around, and Robert Stafford, who we haven't really seen much of. And, there's still a lot of guys on the team. And you mentioned Damari Brown coming back. So just on this team alone, you have probably a good core that'll be back, Alex. So that's where you work. Plus you add the recruits that you said for the next class, for the 25 class. And I mean, make no mistake, they have some really, really good kids coming in. And plus what Mario's formula and what the Hurricanes formula is to, where there is are some deficiencies, they're going to add portal kids. And, I've got to play the game. Everybody else is playing it. So, so I think they'll be fine. It's just right now, it's just a group that's being thrust into the, with the exception maybe of Amish Powell and a Darryl Porter Jr., that really hasn't had that much experience. And, while the front seven has done a really good job, probably in the first half of the season, more so than now, that's why that's why it's been tougher. That's why it was tough against Virginia Tech and Cal and also against Louisville. Because there wasn't, and if even against Florida State, although the defensive front was starting to come back again, but we didn't see the same front four that we saw in the first 3 games of the season. So that's another, if you could be consistent in the front seven, that affords your secondary, even if it is young and even it is experienced, a lot more opportunity to grow and get confidence. And, you look at the games, especially the Cal game when Mendoza had 4 plays over 50 yards. So, that's not one thing. That's not something that you want to see. And obviously last Saturday, Florida State's offense is a shell of what it was last year. And certainly, the Seminoles, have kids, but just not enough, to make plays against basically anybody, as they've shown. But haven't even scored over 21 points in any game.
Wow. Well, we're only getting started on this episode of Locked on Canes. I want to talk more about that Miami victory against the Florida State Seminoles and what we learned about the Canes, right? Because I have some positives. We have some negatives. We'll keep it going right here. We're going to talk about the Duke game a little bit later on. When I have the opportunity to pick the brain of a Larry Blustein, we take full advantage of that. My friends, you want to keep it locked right here. And we're live, by the way. So smash that like button. If you're watching us on YouTube, smash the like button and subscribe. If you listen to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. We keep it rolling right here on this brand new episode of Locked on Canes. You want to keep it locked. I'm keeping it locked to FanDuel. And I'll admit, I was surprised when I logged on to FanDuel.com this morning and I looked for the odds, the opening odds for Miami hosting the Duke Blue Devils. I thought Miami might be favored by 10, 11 points. Hurricanes are favored by 20.5 points this week. 20.5 points. Miami is expected to ruin the Manny Diaz return to Hard Rock Stadium. So if you like that, if you think Miami's going to blow them out, win by 3 more touchdowns, you want to take Miami minus 20.5. If you think Duke is going to cover, you take Duke plus 20.5. You get it all on FanDuel and get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's FanDuel. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked on Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. We have Larry Blustein with us, 560 WQAM, Prep Red Zone, Florida, the Sixth Ring Canes Show. He does it all. All right, so Blue, would you say how much of what we saw this past Saturday, where Miami, they held Florida State to 14 points, the second touchdown was, scored kind of late in garbage time. Miami held Florida State's passing game to like 115 yards through the air. But I also understand Florida State's offense is embarrassing. So do you feel like Miami had a bounce back game on defense, or is the jury still out because we just don't know, given that was against Florida State?
Yeah, let's be honest, this wasn't one of Florida State's best offensive teams. You can't compare them to a Louisville, can't compare them to Virginia Tech or even Cal. But the one thing about FSU, and I said this the other day, and I'll say it again, Miami won't face a better defensive and more athletic defense than FSU. They just won't. If you could see, they got the Cam Ward 5 times. They made tough. They made sure that, with their players, and most of the kids in the secondary from here, Earl Little, and you look at the kid Knowles from MacArthur, who really did a great job on Xavier Restrepo, limited him to 4 catches for like 40 yards or 30 yards. They have that ability on the defense because they're very active up front. Their linebacker play with Omar Graham, from Stranahan, did a tremendous job. They're super athletic on defense. And you could see things that happened against Louisville and things that happened against other programs just did not consistently happen for Miami against Florida State. So with that out of the way, you look at Duke this week and Georgia Tech, and then Wake Forest, and then against Syracuse, none of those 4 teams will be anywhere near the, have any near the athleticism that Florida State on the defensive side. But obviously offense, all 4 of those teams coming up are going to have better offenses, which is going to put a little bit more pressure on Miami's defense, like it's happened the first, the last couple of weeks, with Cal and Virginia Tech and certainly Louisville. But they're showing improvement, but you can't really base it on last week because, other than, a couple of long runs by a quarterback who is going to be good. The Kronhager kid or whatever his name is. He's going to be good. And we saw him at Elite 11, but they just don't have enough around them. So I would not judge it on last week, but, move on to the next 4 games and let's see how they play because, certainly Duke has a little bit more firepower.
For Miami's offense against Florida State, I think I actually think it's good that Miami's offense, they've set the bar so high for themselves that I see so many Miami fans complaining about only scoring 36 points. Like, oh, what a failure. We didn't put 50 on those guys. I see that sort of stuff. And, Cam Ward has, with his statistics this year, has set the bar so high. He only throws for 208 yards, didn't throw a touchdown pass. He did catch a touchdown. He didn't throw a touchdown pass in the game. But, at the same time, Blue, it's like from where I sit, you got it. And you mentioned it, Florida State's very good defensive backs, athletic defense. You have to take what the defense gives to you. So it's like if someone's going to complain about the lack of explosive plays in the passing game, how can you ignore 230 yards in the running game? And, Damian Martinez especially, but also Mark Fletcher just, tore Florida State's front 7 to shreds in that game. I appreciate the fact that Miami's offense is balanced enough and multiple enough where if you have a game where you just can't go out there and throw for 400 yards, that you're able to get 230 on the ground and win that way. I appreciate it.
Well, you take a look too, in over the first 7 weeks of the season, a lot of people are, you take the fans, what they say, they're fans and they have the right to say what they say. But when you're knocking a kid like Damian Martinez, he wasn't worth it. How did he ever do so well at Oregon State? He's slow. He doesn't do this. But you have to also remember, in Miami's complex offense, and it is a complex offense because it has a lot of moving parts. I mean, he's just feeling it now to the point where he feels comfortable. And you remember, his running at Oregon State was a whole lot different than right now. It was, you didn't have the quarterback play and you didn't have this and that. He was pretty much the star of the stars. So he's learning how to run. You could see the kid's going to go to the NFL because he catches the ball. He's a tackle-to-tackle kid. He reminds me a little bit of Javaris James was, just on his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield and, just be that guy. And I think moving forward over the next 4 games plus, you're going to see a guy that has an opportunity to average over 100 yards a game. And, you get, as you mentioned, Mark Fletcher, and God bless, his father, and who I knew extremely well. And I know when I told you last week, that was something that was tough, but he came and he played and he did a great job. And between those two, and then you add AJ into the mix, and then hopefully Chris Johnson down the line, Miami's got a really good running back room. And, and that's the one thing. And then now with Damian Martinez, you have a guy who's been there, done that. He's more of a soothing soul. He understands. He probably embraced Mark Fletcher over the last week more so than anybody because they're close. They're in meetings together. They probably hang out together. So having a guy who, is a little bit more mature, a little bit older, in any room, whether it be the running back room or as they, in your tight end room where you have a couple of quality kids as well. So, yeah, I think people have to understand that in this complex offense, you're just not going to be able to arrive and start making an immediate impact. So, but I think moving forward, you're going to see this guy be an integral part of the offense. And, but that's the one thing too about this team, when you're winning, and obviously they are, everybody becomes one of the moving parts, and obviously Cam Ward's the star of the stars, but, when he when he didn't have time to throw, they got to him a few times. I mean, you could see how he just, bounced back up. And to me, he hasn't been in much adversity. He usually overcomes it and then ends up throwing for 400 yards. So, yeah, I think this game proved me a lot. And I know a lot of people, they'll never give anybody credit and this and that. But I watched Florida State. I went and watched them 2 games, whole games. I saw them against Duke. They dominated Duke. Duke couldn't do much against them. Mistakes and stuff on offense that hurt them.
And that was the thing, Blue. Can I just say something where and again, like I'm not trying to say this was some juggernaut performance by Miami this past weekend, but I will say, like you, I've watched just about every Florida State game this year, and their biggest problem, outside of the fact that their offense is just bad, but there have been a lot of games where it's like, you've got a high snap that goes over the quarterback's head. You throw a pick six, you get an untimely fumble. Florida State, relatively speaking, they played a clean game against Miami, which they hadn't done all year, and they still got dominated.
Well, the only other game that they played really like that was Cal, and especially from the defensive standpoint.
Right.
And I watched that game, and Ott didn't have any room to run. Mendoza didn't have time to throw, and that's their only win. And when I was trying to tell people, that I know, and especially in our 6-ring canes, where you sometimes to get Vish and Jazz and DJ to understand. I mean, I know that they see the Hurricanes, and I understand that, but certainly you have to, understand the reasons. And that's why I went back and watched full games. I went back and watched the entire Duke game, went back and watched the entire Cal game. And I saw an FSU team that the only deficiency was on the offensive side, because defensively let's face it, they're getting the same kids Miami is. They're recruiting the same kids. A lot of those guys played and with against and with each other. So, like I saw a lot of those players on defense, and I thought they played a pretty good game on defense. Miami's got superior talent, there's no doubt about it, but So, when I heard everyone, oh, come on, they're awful. I said, no, they're not awful. I mean, 3 quarters, go back and watch the Clemson game. They were in the damn game for 3 quarters, and then their offense started making mistakes, and that's what happened. And obviously Clemson's one of the better teams in the country.
When we come back, I want to talk about something Mario Cristobal said post-game after Florida State, which was really a message to recruits out there, talking about the trajectory of the programs within the state of Florida. Nobody knows about that better than Larry Blustein. You guys want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I'm certainly not done yet with game time. Guys, we've got another home game coming up. Miami hosting the Duke Blue Devils. You're going to find the best deals, especially right up until kickoff at noon on Saturday, when you use Game Time. Game Time is the only ticketing app that I use. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Guys, the features at Game Time are a game changer. The all-in pricing feature is going to show you the total up front, no surprise fees at checkout. That's how I like it. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the Game Time app before you buy. Very important, so you know exactly what angle you're going to be looking at. You get that at the Game Time app. Guys, the lowest price guarantee means Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. Guys, you have to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you so much for making this live episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Canes on YouTube. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your audio pods. Hit that thumbs up button, like, and make sure you guys are checking out Locked On ACC. I co-host that show with Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. We take you around the conference, all the big games. And, of course, Miami's got another conference game coming up, Blue. But before we get to that, I want to talk about something Mario Cristobal said after the game. I heard him say it with Don Bailey Jr. He doubled down on it in his post-game media conference, saying that, if you're a recruit, you look at the trajectory of Miami, which is clearly on the way up, versus the trajectory of other teams in the state of Florida, with Florida State Seminoles at 1-7. Florida's been good here and there, but inconsistent. Billy Napier's future is uncertain. Blue, you're out there almost at every high school game there is. I know you can only go to one game at a time, but you're out there all over the state. Can you feel that in recruiting, Miami's trajectory, and is that translating to the players in the state?
Yes and no. I mean, I was standing there where I was sitting in the seat when he was talking and, during the post game and listening to everything he said. And I can understand Miami's trajectory is kind of higher, but you can see, let's flash back a year ago. Things can change. Miami was battling to be bowl eligible last year at this time, and things have turned around. And you mentioned, what Billy's done at Florida, and, winning 3 out of 4 with Georgia coming up this week. I think every one of those schools, Florida State, Miami, are all, in this thing to win it. Let's look back again last year. Florida State was 13-1. It's not like they're coming off a 5-12 or 5-8 season, 7 season. They're coming off an undefeated regular season last year. So they're, and you could see from the recruits that they have and the recruits that they have coming, plus, you never know what it is the offseason. So I can understand what he's saying. I think from the standpoint of recruiting, I think that Miami's way ahead right now because of the fact, like I told you, you look at all the kids that have played from the freshman class, the redshirt freshmen, even the sophomore that came in during 2023 and, the 2024 and what they have coming in 2025. So I understand what he's saying, but you can't, especially in this day and age, of Indiana's being 8-0 or Colorado's being 6-1, that things can change, in less than a year. But they changed in those schools because strictly the portal. Miami's changing from a combination. Sure, you'd like to have a De'Ara King. A King every. I keep talking.
Cam Ward.
I called him De'Ara King. But sure, you'd like to have a quarterback like that and linemen like that and having a running back like that every year. But there's no guarantee. And if what Nick Saban said, in his first couple of weeks on the game day, as he goes, if you're going to spend money on these guys, they've got to work out. And, you're very fortunate that what Miami's brought in has worked out. And, but what I'm trying to say is that anything could happen, but Miami's more apt to have success because of what they're doing recruiting wise.
You've watched a lot of ACC football this season, Blue. You mentioned you watched Duke versus Florida State in week 8. I've watched Duke a handful of other times this year. Somebody mentioned they won the turnover margin by 6 against SMU. They still found a way to lose that game, but they beat Florida State despite only 180 yards of offense in that game. Their defense won that game, Blue. What are the biggest dangers that the Duke Blue Devils are going to present to the Miami Hurricanes this Saturday noon at Hard Rock Stadium?
Well, you have a defensive-oriented coach, obviously, who's probably, as we speak, watching film after, not just last week's game, but watching the last couple of games and, what they do and what their tendencies are. And, he may look at, say, hey, listen, if we do, maybe pay more attention to Restrepo, that won't ignite, that'll prevent them from having those, those scores that. So you look at what he has coming back on defense or what has played. I watched the front four. And I thought like the kid, Vincent Anthony, I thought he was good. They brought in Kendi Charles this year, who has played extremely well. Their linebacking core has been, extremely good too. They have the Alex Howard and then Ozzie Nicholas. They've done pretty well on the defensive side. They also, went strong in their secondary. They brought back Chandler Rivers from last year. They brought back Terry Moore. But on the offensive side of the ball, you look at a kid like Malik Murphy. I mean, this is a guy that makes the team go. He's been helping extremely well, getting the ball out, to Eli Pancall. They have a pretty decent running game, the kid Jarquez Moore. So they've got talent. But I just think that where they came up short, as you said, I mean, is the fact that they don't convert. They have one of the worst third down conversion teams in the country. And that's going to be the difference. Miami needs to their defense needs to stay off the field. And then if Miami's defense stays off the field, I just think that this will be the key to the victory. But no, you can never close your mind to a Manny Diaz team because he's a defensive mind, and that's what he's done extremely well over the years. Maybe not as a head coach, but anytime he's worked as a DC, whether it be at Texas or also Mississippi State or over the last couple of years at Penn State, he's always found ways to kind of shut down the keys to the opposing team. So obviously his number one priority is going to be slowing down Ward. And that's everybody's thing. So if you do that and then you kind of limit who, it's sort of like I remember when back in high school, there was you take a look at some of these kids who were just dominating, and maybe they were receivers or they were running backs. And obviously Devin Hester comes to mind because when he played at Suncoast High School, he was just a terror, and they played Hallandale one year, and first two touches he had as a running back, he went 70 and 63 yards. So the Hallandale defensive coaches said, hey, listen, you know what? We may not stop him, but let's get to the quarterback. And they did. Yeah. And Suncoast never scored again. Hallandale beat them 44-14. So those are the type of things which you got to do. And I'm sure Manny's used to that. He's used to the fact that, he's had to slow down some really good Big Ten offenses the last couple of years. So, yeah, always beware. Come in there. That 20 points is a large margin. And obviously, you'd like to think, well, yeah, Miami should be able to do it, but there's no guarantee. This last week, a couple of plays kept Miami from not covering. So anything happens in a game of football, but beware. Don't let your guard down and just play like you've been playing. Play as the kids say, what Mario Cristobal says, we're 1-0. And that's the only thing you could go and you could judge is, not look at the last 7-8 games, but look at the one game that you just won.
I love it. Well, great stuff as always here from Larry Blustein. You can make sure you follow him on X at Prep Red Zone FL. And Blue, I know your radio show is going to be awesome tomorrow night because I'm going to be making I hope it's awesome because I'm going to be making an appearance at about 9:05 p.m. tomorrow. Let people know what to expect tomorrow night on 560 WQAM.
Yeah, well, we're going to have a couple of legendary high school coaches, Ice Harris, who's done a tremendous job, with Booker T. Washington. Obviously, he lost a lot of kids over the last couple of years, but he's still getting it done. He's 6-3. Obviously one of the top. Mike Smith, who the head coach at American Heritage Plantation, upset St. Thomas Aquinas last Friday night. So obviously he's going to be another one. Yourself will be one of the guests. And also we'll talk about the Florida-Georgia game this week, which is going to be an interesting game. Yeah, Georgia's a really good football team, but you flash back to the 13-12 win against Kentucky and you think to yourself, wait, on any given day, Florida's got some talent and DJ Lagway's done a tremendous job. So you never know. So it's exciting. And then we'll take a look at the upcoming matchup between FAU and USF, which will be on Friday night up in Boca Raton. So it's going to be a good show. We're excited about it. And then this evening at 8:30 on 6 Ring Canes, we'll kind of rehash last week's game and certainly look ahead to Duke. So he's got a good full couple of days.
I love it. Make sure you guys are supporting Blue. And thank you so much for supporting us here on Locked On Canes. Best way to do that is to smash that like button, subscribe. Also, if you'd like to become a Locked On Canes insider, get text directly from me to you and vice versa. Click the link in the show description below. You can try it free for 14 days. And Actually, I think we're going to talk to you guys later tonight because I want to get an offensive line perspective. We're going to bring on Casey McDermott, former Miami Hurricanes offensive lineman, talk a little bit about that run blocking, how we can make sure we keep protecting Cam Ward because the protection was not the best the other night. We'll get into all of it. You guys want to keep it locked right here. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.